Welcome to Thursday Thoughts, your weekly dose of real, honest conversation on all things personal growth. These are the chats Lucy and I love having every week over on Instagram. They're unfiltered, unedited, and always rooted in practical tools and a dose of inspiration. Let's dive in. Okay, so we're going to talk about stillness today. Now, stillness, I think, is really important because we, in our very modern lives, we might be still sitting still, or we might be still watching TV, or we might be still scrolling on our phone. But actually, what I'm talking about when we're talking about stillness is that internal stillness, that stillness of our mind, of our thoughts. Because these days, I believe it's very, very hard to find that stillness. We are on all the time, more than we have ever been, ever before. We have these little very high-powered computers in our pockets at all times, where we can be contacted at all times, where we can access any information at any time of day, where people have access to us, and I'm at all times. And so we're on. You can look at your emails first thing in the morning. You can, and we're not designed, I believe, we're not designed to be on like that all the time. And, the stats show that anxiety levels are on the up, mental health is on the up. And I think to counter that, finding stillness within yourself is absolutely key and fundamental. And it's something which I never had any sort of awareness of for many, many years. It was never something I kind of did. I never sort of thought about finding times of quiet to myself. But as I have got older, and as I have struggled with my own thoughts and my own mental health at certain periods of my life, I have found that carving out moments of planned stillness have been an absolute game changer. Times where I can actually really quieten down that noise, which is constant, and build. And ultimately what it's doing is building self-awareness. It's building that awareness of what's going on for me. And only when you do that can you then start to face some of the stuff which is going on. I think a lot of us, and I think I'm guilty of this, keep going, and keep busy, because we've got, because there's a lot going on, but also it means you don't have to sit with your own stuff, your own internal noise, your own shit that is going on. And actually, when we give ourselves an opportunity to be still and get quiet, that is when actually it can feel really uncomfortable and not very nice initially and at certain points, because you're having to come face to face with a lot of the things which you are constantly trying to avoid. However, when you do come face to face with that stuff and you face it and you kind of move through it, actually that is when you can finally start to find a level of peacefulness, of real joy, of a state of calmness, and which is why I'm so passionate about doing my practices like breath work and guiding it for others, because that is what I'm gifting people, is that opportunity to get quiet within themselves. And actually, and so some people find it really hard. It's not easy. Some people find it really hard. Mind is busy or thinking about it. But the more you practice it, you have these moments of real clarity, of real stillness, and it's a real game changer. And that is when moments of creativity, of inspiration, of listening to your intuition, that's when all of that starts to come through. It's like when you're in the shower, you often, that's when your moment, your greatest thoughts come through, because you're just in the moment. You're not thinking about anything else. You're not doing. So that is really what I feel is the topic that we're talking about today.
Totally. And I mean, I completely agree with everything you've just said. And actually, just to add one thing before I forget, if you find that particularly difficult to sit, or to be still, to find that stillness, if you find that particularly difficult because your mind is so noisy, and all of our minds are noisy, but some I think are worse than others, that's even more reason to lean into this. That's even more reason why it's even more important to find those moments of stillness. And like you say, Polly, it's not, it's about internal stillness. And again, like you said, we live in a world where there is just constant noise and pressure and things going on all the freaking time. And what stillness does, and the kind of stillness that you and I are talking about, is it helps us to connect back to ourselves and find out what is going on with us. And also, and especially, you just mentioned breath work. It's a way of regulating our nervous system, and to sort of access that clarity within us and remember what's actually important. And also, for me anyway, I find it a really good way to connect to something bigger. It's the way to remember that actually we are this tiny little speck in this vast infinite universe, and it is a way of coming back to that and reminding ourselves that we are always connected to that higher wisdom. So that's kind of how and why I sort of try and find those moments of stillness. And actually, speaking of, quote, stillness doesn't have to be like sitting like a statue completely still. Stillness can also be found on a walk. That mental stillness that you and I are talking about. I mean, I try. I mean, I'm terrible because when I go for my walks every day, more often than not, I'm plugged in, my headphones are in, I'm listening to something. But actually, I do try, at least for a part of it, to turn the podcast off or turn the audiobook off, because that's what we need to do, is to just pause on that. Just sorry, I've got loads of notifications coming on my phone, which is why I keep flicking them off. It's that we need to take a pause from. It's that information overload. There's just stuff constantly coming into our mind. But yeah, so stillness doesn't have to be actual physical stillness. It because you and I are talking about the mental stillness. So actually, something like going on a walk on the beach, listening to the waves, that is stillness in itself. When you unplug completely and you're just there with your own thoughts, you're not actually listening to anything. That is a way of being still. But it's such a great way of regulating your nervous system and lowering cortisol and bringing you back into your parasympathetic nervous system. And you and I both practice breathwork regularly, and I also talk a lot about meditation, because meditation for me is the one thing that really does allow me to be completely still. And also, by the way, just to add, I listen to a lot of guided meditation. So meditation doesn't have to be in complete silence. Like, I rarely do a meditation where I'm literally sitting in silence. Normally I've either got music on or I'm listening to a guided meditation, but that still allows you to just calm your nervous system. And for me, with meditation, I find, and this is why it's so important to be consistent, because I find the longer that I've done it, the more and more I've done it, the longer I do it for, the better it gets. Like, the better it gets, the better it gets, the better it gets. And these days, I have to sort of pull myself out of my meditation because I've got to get on with my day. Because actually, when you get connected with that higher power, that higher wisdom, that's something bigger than us, when you really sink, you really kind of drop into a meditation and you really go deep, it's such an amazing feeling. I absolutely fucking love it, And in fact, this morning I was listening to a podcast as I meditated, because the podcast was a kind of like a meditation in itself. And it was a podcast that I listened to last week. And I just thought, I'm gonna sit and listen to this as my meditation and just, see how it feels, because it was talking about exactly this. And so, yeah, a meditation doesn't have to be absolute silence, but, it's just, it really is just so important, like you say, in this busy world, to just connect back to ourselves. And I think you mentioned intuition, because when we're constantly scrolling, watching Netflix, listening to this, doing that, watching that, there are so many things trying to pull our attention in 5 million different directions. We cannot connect back to ourselves and to the truth of what it is that we really, really want. If that makes
Yeah,
sense.
yeah, totally. Yeah, it's really interesting, isn't it? Because yeah, I agree. It's because generally on a walk, I also will be listening to a podcast or listening to something, and I also consciously now take my take my headphones off and try and be silent. And actually, it is difficult sometimes because you kind of think, oh, I'm a bit bored, or I want to be listening to something. It's kind of almost makes the time go quicker when you're listening to something. It's good to get that information, but actually that is exactly a sign that actually it's good sometimes just to be with what is,
Yeah,
because you're looking for it's looking constantly for distractions, trying to pull you away from that present moment.
yeah,
And the more we can be present, then the more we're actually, it's just such good practice to be in that moment. We're just with ourselves and with that moment.
yeah,
So it's hard, but it's not. I would say it's not easy. It's actually easier sometimes to be constantly distracted, and we are constantly distracted. But just being, I mean, there's studies on just even like mind wandering, just literally sitting, gazing out of a window, and letting your mind go and just do its thing. Uh, it just is really good for our nervous systems to just let everything really settle and relax. And if you think about our ancestors from thousands of years ago, they were masters, which is why we always want to kind of find comfort, I think, is they were masters at stillness. Once they had done their jobs, they knew the importance of actually it's really important to rest and be still, because otherwise you're not going to have any energy in case something, you've got to go and find your next thing to eat, or you might be chased by a bear or whatever. So it was really a key that you became very still
yeah,
and you rested. Whereas nowadays, there's constantly something to distract us, and we're not living at all in the present moment, and we
yeah.
lose that. We become further and further away from knowing
From myself.
connecting with ourselves and knowing who we are. And for me, it's only been in the practicing stillness and practicing building this awareness where
Yeah,
I've actually really kind of got to know it sounds a bit freaking cheesy and woo, but it's the truth. It's when I've actually really got to understand who I am and accept myself for who I am. And it's just building that awareness of, it's just a nicer way to be, because you can just you just give less of a fuck about anything, because you know yourself, and you feel much more solid in that relationship with yourself.
yeah,
And yeah, and also it's when you get used to it and you practice it, it does feel really bloody amazing. It
yeah,
feels so nice
yeah,
and relaxing. I can see it because I wear a Whoop band, and so it tracks my heart rate and my stress rates and everything, and honestly it's unbelievable. My heart rate and my stress levels just go whoop and flatline, like I'm asleep when
really.
I sit still. It's really when I sort of
As
in
in
that
when you
meditation
meditate.
zone. When I meditate, yeah. If I do
Yeah,
breath work, it goes up and down a bit, because it depends what sort of breath work I'm doing,
yeah.
because breath work can kind of change it. But when I meditate, it really is. It just puts you into a state of real calm, and your heart rate drops.
That's the
And
thing. It's so good for you physically as well as mentally. It's so good for you physically, isn't it?
yeah, to have that real pause,
Yeah,
it's like a proper little reset to
yeah,
your whole nervous system. It just
yeah,
allows everything to settle. And yeah, and you feel great afterwards. And that is
yeah,
really when, and I said before, it's when those moments of inspiration come, where you suddenly get a really great idea and you've got to act on those. We've talked a lot on this podcast about taking action, how, you've always got to keep moving forward. And yes, you do. But in order to be able to do that, you do need to have moments of knowing what action it is to take, making sure that you're taking aligned action to what is right for you, rather than just going with what you think you should be doing. And I do believe it's only really in these moments of pausing, of stillness, that you can tune in to what is the right sort of action to take.
yeah,
Um, and it, which is right for you. It's like listening to the signals and to the signs. And
Yeah.
sometimes, you can't expect too much. Sometimes nothing happens. It's just a nice pause.
Yeah.
But it builds that ability to be able to pause in other moments. So, this morning, for example, in the inner space in breathwork, we did quite an activating breathwork practice. We did 3 rounds where the breath, 2 minutes of quite activating breathing, and then we did breath holds, and we extended them each time, 3 pauses. And in those pauses, it's all about being soft, being gentle, not forcing anything. But that is such good training, because when you are in real life and shit's hitting the fan and stress is happening, by doing those little practices of being able to pause, you then find that in real life, in the stressy times, you find this ability to be able to literally take a breath, to pause before you react in a way that perhaps isn't as helpful as if you were actually to pause, take a breath, say, okay, I'm okay. And it's really powerful. For me, it has been the biggest game changer. I used to be really reactive, and now I upset my children, particularly my daughter, my 15-year-old, because I don't react when she wants me to react. And she's like, oh, you're so annoying. Why are you saying so calm? But it's like, because actually, it's like, well, you can't, but you don't need to rant and rave and all the time. Sometimes it's good to get stuff off your chest, but actually it's a training. You have an ability. Everybody has an ability to choose how they respond, but it's only through that stillness, I believe, that you train yourself to be able to do that.
I will only ever recommend brands that I know, love, and use myself. And one of those is Ancient and Brave. Honestly, they've become part of my daily habits. The very first thing I do every morning is pour myself a big glass of water with their true hydration in it. It feels like such a simple ritual, but it really sets me up for the day. And I know I'm properly rehydrating with their blend of electrolytes and minerals, especially before I exercise, which I always do in the morning. Then later on, when I make my coffee, I stir in their true collagen powder into the coffee. Now, it blends in straight away, no fuss, there's no taste, and collagen is something we naturally lose as we age, but it's so important for our skin, joints, and overall vitality. Now, I'll be honest, Ancient and Brave may cost a little more than some of the tubs you'll spot on supermarket shelves, but the difference is you're getting the highest quality ingredients, sourced with integrity and tested to a higher standard, and absolutely no nasties added. That's why I trust them and why I think they're worth every penny. And because I want you to be able to try them out for yourself, I've got a special offer for you. As a listener of this podcast, you can get 20% off your very first order. All you need to do is click the link in the show notes and pop in the code POLLYW20 at checkout. They've got more than just collagen and hydration too. They've got creatine, they've got blends, supplements. So it's a perfect chance to explore their range and make the most of that 20% off.
Totally. And, like you say, practices like breathwork and meditation, it's not just when you're doing them that they're benefiting you. But just going back to the meditation and breathwork actually, but meditation is so incredibly good for your health in so many ways. Like it really is. And I find that when I'm really deep in meditation, it sounds ridiculous, but I can feel the good that it is doing my body. It's like I can almost feel my body like buzzing.
With energy, you feel the energy.
Yeah.
Yes.
And it's such an amazing feeling. And ultimately we are energetic beings. We are more than 99% energy. And when you get really into meditation, you can feel your body. I don't know, it sort of hums. It's actually such a delicious feeling. I really love it. But what I was going to say is that when you do things like that regularly and you find that stillness, whether it's through breathwork or through meditation, whatever it is, it sort of pours over into the rest of your life. And actually, one thing I wanted to just mention is that you say that you get ideas when you're in meditation. I don't. I very rarely get creative ideas when I'm actually in a meditation. But I know that when I'm regularly meditating, I get more creative ideas in my life. And actually, one of the times that I personally get most of the kind of like, oh, I need to do that on the podcast, or oh, I need to talk about that in my membership, or whatever it is. Those moments I tend to get when I'm walking, because I'll often put something in my notes or record myself a voice note, because these ideas often come to me. But I think in order I think we're all creative. Human beings are creative. We are creators. But actually, if we're not feeling creative, it's probably because we're not allowing our minds to get still. You have to kind of bring your cortisol down. You have to kind of bring your nervous system back into balance to allow yourself to be creative and to allow those creative ideas and thoughts to come through. Do you know what I mean?
And it's also that. Yeah, and it's also that connection. Sorry, it's also that connection with that kind of whatever you want to call it, that higher sort of source, that higher when and I never used to kind of get this ever, but now, and I think when you give yourself those opportunities of stillness, you really feel it, that there is, of course there is a higher energy, is that, a better word for it. And it's when you connect with that is when that inspiration starts to come.
Yeah. And that can be on a meditation, or it can be on a walk. Or another way actually to get still is to journal in silence. So journal without music on, because that is a really, really good way of getting mindful and getting your thoughts down on the page. I think journaling is a really good way of kind of connecting back to yourself. And, one thing just to point out, and you and I have talked about this before, but I think I'm right in saying that actually it is literally and I really think that we all need to think about this, because this is so huge. We are only seeing with in our 3D 5 senses world that we live in, this human world. We are literally only able to perceive a minute fraction of what actually is reality, quote, reality. We think reality is, oh, my body and that person over there and this table that my phone's on and all the rest of it. But if you actually think about it, it's a complete mind fuck, but in a really good way. We literally only perceive the tiniest bits of what is actually going on, because there is so much more going on than our senses can perceive. And that is what meditation, that is what getting still allows you to kind of tune into, because ultimately, I always use this example because it just cracks me up, and because I think it's such a good example. It's such a good way of thinking about it. Like, you only have to look at a bird flying across the sky. I know I've said it a million times, but for real, you only have to look at a fucking bird flying across the sky to realize that this life, this universe, this world is about so much more than what we actually think it is and what we can actually perceive. There's so much, there's quite clearly some higher power, higher wisdom, whatever you want to call it, universe, God, source energy. I don't give a shit what you call it. Depending on what lots of people call it, lots of different things, but there is a higher power, a higher consciousness than, beyond what we can physically see and perceive with our senses. And when you, rather than going, oh my God, what load of bollocks, because it's not bollocks, it's scientific fact. When you actually tune into that, it actually, what it does is it opens up your world. It expands your world. It's exciting to think that there is so much more to life than we can actually see. Do you know what I mean?
If anyone's thinking this is complete bollocks, then you just need to go and follow Joe Dispenza and some of the work that he's done, because that is like, it just totally amazed me, using meditation, using all of this to seriously heal themselves from these terrible diseases and stuff. It is really quite incredible, and he's putting science behind it, which is so great. It's not just the woo, it's like he's really using getting so much research. So yeah, it is mind blowing. So I just think
Yeah.
for all of us, it's just really good to just carve out even a few minutes every day, just to close your eyes, get still, tune in, just to ask how you are, notice how you are, to notice how you're breathing.
Yeah.
It's that interoception again, which we've talked about before. It's that relationship you have with your internal world, and just really tuning into it rather than just blank it out and just being on autopilot, which so many of us are on, going through the days, not in control of how we are, knowing how we are, how we're reacting, just, going mindlessly. It's about becoming mindful about everything and understanding ourselves better. So I think that's really it.
And also, I think when you realize, and this isn't woo woo shite, it's fact, it's science, that there is so much more to reality that we can actually see.
Yeah.
And I think when you really lean into that, like I said, it allows you, it allows you to, apart from anything else, it kind of puts you and your life in perspective in a really good way, because you just think, oh my fucking God, I'm this tiny speck of what actually exists in the universe. And I think when you put it in perspective like that, it's actually really, really helpful. It kind of, in a way, it can help you to take life slightly less seriously.
Yeah,
when you
absolutely.
really think about it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, and you're just so much more grateful for for everything, for the small things. It's you can zoom out and go, oh gosh, things aren't actually that bad, and actually I live a really great life, and actually I'm very lucky to be here. And yeah, it's just about, the more that we can be present, the more we're going to worry, the less we're going to worry about things that we can't really control, or if we're just going to be in that moment. That really is where you find that real sense of peacefulness, and it is a practice.
Totally. And one thing, just thinking about like social media, scrolling through social media is not being in the moment. Is it? It's not. It's being in somebody else's moment. In fact, I think we should do another Instagram live about social media, and just about how to kind of manage your consumption and just really be aware of the effects and the impacts that it's having, and trying to kind of perhaps reduce your usage. And I'm talking to myself here as well, by the way. But I think it's such an important conversation to have. Not saying that it's pure evil. There are benefits, but there are also a hell of a lot of things about it that are not good. And I think it's worth having a conversation about that.
Okay.
So,
well, let's do that next week. Perfect.
Yeah. Okay. Cool.
Okay. All right. Fantastic. Well, I think that's us done. I will see you next. I'm off to Austria this week.
Oh my God,
on my
yes, of
breathwork
course you
retreat,
are.
which is very exciting. So I could be a little tired on Monday, but I should be feeling great though, because we get back later on Sunday. So.
Oh my God. Well, look, have the most amazing time. I can't wait to hear all about it, and I can't wait to see it on Instagram.
Yes.
All right, babe.
Perfect.
See you Monday.
All right. Lots of love.
Lots of love.
Bye.
Bye. Bye. Bye.